Holy smokes. What an intro that was. LVC, we're rolling. NFL week number 2, Circa Millions contest here on the Football Betting Countdown show with Covers.com every Thursday, 10 a.m. in theory, Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, but a little bit behind today, but we're going to get you up to date with everything for the contest lines, which just came out. We've got them ready to go, and we're going to try maybe do a little bit better job than we did in week 1 trying to project these consensus numbers. What do you think?
Well, we didn't think about one factor, and that is, there were too many people watching the show, so they saw what we thought they would be, so they avoided those games. So I think we're influencing the market.
That's exactly what happened. But in to add to that, I would say the one thing that I learned from doing this really for the first time on the fly last week as the numbers came out was we did a very good job of picking lopsided matchups, but we didn't do a very good job of picking popular games. And so even though 4 of the 5 consensus picks that we projected were north of 75% in favor of the picks and how they were distributed, the game just wasn't picked enough. So there's an important factor that we need to consider going forward of which games are going to be the most popular once we qualify them as that lopsided matchup.
Yeah, unfortunately, in these early weeks, it's really not an important issue. The important issue is just picking winners. So, we get to error early, and hopefully we'll learn something throughout the year, and we'll be much better at it when it matters more.
Are you still in line with the 70% projection that you were adamant about in week 1 for our combined record here?
I said 60.
6. Okay. So 60, 70. You're still adamant about that?
No.
I said 54 for the record.
No, I think we can get it back up there. These are all issues that are completely out of our control. So, if we're picking 75-25 games, well, that in itself is pretty successful as far as I'm concerned. But there's a little bit of a lottery aspect to what people are going to gravitate. And then also we're 2 days ahead. I mean, a lot of stuff changes. My personal picks would have been different on a Saturday. So we're sticking our necks out there early. And if you asked us on Saturday, I think we would be changing a handful of games, possibly some weeks. So all factors in what we're doing here.
Well, and that's a good point, too, because I was going to say the second thing that I learned was needs to be consideration doing this on a Thursday morning for which games may move, because once you get to Saturday, like we saw with the 49ers when we did the show last Thursday, that was at 7.5 in the contest lines, which matched what the market was offering. But by the time we got to Saturday, that game was already 9.5 at most places. So that causes a difference, too, makes it a little bit more complicated. Before we get into week 2, important question. Do you have any other type of shirt? You're the classiest dresser here of the broadcast duo, but a very important question, though. Are we going to see you in just a plain white cotton T-shirt at any point this season? You're sticking with the Hawaiian.
Well, the last time I wore a non-Hawaiian shirt, I hit a lot of comments going, "Hey, we never saw you in a different shirt." So the washing machine is broken, so unless it gets fixed soon, I'm gonna have to resort to it.
It's just a constant rotation.
Yeah.
I picture you having the tie wheel where the ties rotate around on the motorized rack. You have that with the Hawaiian shirts in the closet. And it just comes up and laid
out on the floor. No, I'm kidding. Everything's very organized, but we'll see. You just won't see me in T-shirts generally.
Phenomenal. Let's go to week 2. As that I sort of mentioned, the popularity of the picks is very important. So in terms of what most bettors saw that stood out in terms of great performances in week 1 from an offensive standpoint, that's going to matter a ton, I think, going forward. So aside from the Rams, was there any other team that stood out to you with a great offensive performance that may carry over into week 2 as we're looking at some of these consensus picks?
Well, those Packers really were impressive last week, weren't they?
The whole 3 points.
And then, when was the last last time a team scored that few points and were double-digit favorites the next week?
Doesn't happen often.
On the road, yeah.
It falls in line with the 11-3-3 theory now that's adjusted, where it was forever the 10-3-3, but now with the extra game where you get teams that'll play 10 games right to sort of their power rating, 3 way above it, and then 3 are just duds. And that happens in NFL, it happens in college football. And it's always tricky for most bettors to adjust to that because they see what they saw last week, and that tends to be like the absolute truth for most. But then in reality, it's really just sort of a clunker of a game. I think that's Green Bay very much in week 1. So that jump now to 11, I think it's just reflective of how bad the Lions actually are.
Yeah, the Saints obviously stick out to answer your question, but that's going to be interesting. We need to see what the COVID developments are on that game before I think a lot of people are going to have the confidence to get behind them. And plus, you've got that hook on there.
Well, it's 6 offensive coaches potentially out for that game, certainly missing the full week of practice. My question with the Saints going forward, though, now that we've seen tape, that was really the first surprise game. You didn't know what Sean Payton, a great play caller, was going to do with the combination of quarterbacks. You didn't know how he was going to handle his running backs. And now that's really all out in the open. People, other coaches, game planners can see what he did. I think that kills some of that surprise element a little bit. And important not to forget, that was a team that there was a lot of divide between professionals in the offseason, between the over and the under on the win total. So interesting sort of developments there with the Saints. So I definitely agree. Saints stood out big time in week 1. I think you really have to look at the Rams and what they put up. Seattle, in a way, looked dominant, but a little bit maybe under the radar to an extent coming through. We're not seeing an enormous difference in how the market's viewing them. A really big number this week against Tennessee. Do you think that carries over into week 2, or is that just where the Seahawks are as a difficult team to rate?
That's an interesting consideration because Seattle let the gas off against Indianapolis. That game could have been a lot worse. And they usually let the gas off. So that's the hard part of dealing with these Seattle games sometimes. And there are a lot of believers in Tennessee still. A lot of people think Tennessee's got that explosive offense that is going to show up. So I'm going to be really interested in that game to see what happens and whether people. I don't think people are going to be backing Seattle in the contest. I think that one will have more Tennessee people on it, is a guess, but I don't think it's going to be really significant.
Last one before we go to week 2, the Arizona Cardinals. Speaking of the Tennessee Titans, they absolutely demolished them in week 1. Was that a sign of things to come from the Cardinals? Or again, when we're talking about the 11-3-3, was that one of their 3 games they'd play this season that are way above the team that they actually are?
Well, I think you had 2 teams on their 3-3 meeting each other. So Atlanta's not that bad. And Arizona's not that good. So, but Arizona has the potential to be very good this year. It's not going to surprise me if they do really well. People forget Murray was injured most of the season. And the next time you bet against Kyler Murray, you're going to remember how good he is because he's going to drive you nuts when you watch him. You're scared of him. He can break a play anytime. And every time you bet against him, you're like, God, why do I bet against him? Yeah. So just remember that.
It's like the Russell Wilson thing where you're betting against him and you're like, okay, great. We've got him in 3rd and 13. We're going to get the ball back. And all of a sudden he's running for a gain of 20. And you're just agonizing to watch Kyler Murray, any of these mobile quarterbacks, but certainly truth to that for sure. Week 2, looking ahead, again, we are trying to project the top 5 consensus picks for the circuit contest. These are not the picks we are making individually with our entries in the contest, but we're trying to give everybody watching a look into what the top 5 consensus picks will be coming up. We're going to try to guess them each and every Thursday here on the season. So if you're playing in the contest, it gives you some insight, something to think about. If you're playing in home contests, local contests, other ones as well, there's a number of spread pools. This tends to sort of reflect a lot of those too when you look at the consensus numbers once they're released on Saturday. Not a great week for us in week 1. We went 1-4. First time doing this for both of us. So that was we'll own it. We'll accept it. And we'll move on to week 2. Do you have one team that stands out to you more than the rest in terms of something you think is absolutely going to be in the top 5 for week 2?
This is a very tough week. I'm going to be interested to see how we come up with 5 games, because I don't. But I think we're both going to agree on the one that I by default has to be up there is New England.
Yes,
got a half a point to the better than most shops, and people aren't looking to be on the Jets side, and people like New England. And even if it is a divisional road favorite, I still think that they're going to get a lot of support, certainly in the top 5.
we saw a couple of road teams last week end up in the top 5, so it's not like it's exclusive to the home sides. But like you mentioned, this is a game at 5.5, currently about a half point better than market, which is at 6 most places. 6 in the NFL, very important number. This game, although when you look at the open, there were some folks who were able to get in very early with the Pats at 3.5, but this game moved very, very quickly. And so even though you're looking at the board, you see 3.5 at open, you see it at 6 now. 3.5 and 4 went really, really fast. So there was certainly support on New England. But like you mentioned, on the road, not a lot of people are going to be wanting to bet the Jets. The Pats were one team in week 1 that had the box score sort of skewed against them. The stats probably suggested they should have won that game. The numbers that professionals tend to look at, yards per play, yards per pass, differential, success rate, all pointed towards the Patriots in that game. So now you get a Jets offensive line without Becton against this defensive front for New England, with Belichick coming up with the game plan. We know what he does against rookie QBs. And although we're seeing Zach Wilson highlights surface on incomplete passes thrown downfield on Twitter from the analytics group and the game film study guys, I still don't know how anyone gets to the conclusion that Wilson looked better than Mac in week 1. So I think a lot of things definitely pointing to the Patriots being a popular side. And I would very much agree that they're in the top 5 despite laying the points on the road. Number 2, I'm going to throw one at you. And it's by virtue of seeing how things played out last week. I'm going to go with the LA Rams, because Sunday night, it's what bettors saw last. That was a huge performance against the Bears with Stafford. All of that hype was very much realized. And now they're going into Indianapolis, who bettors also saw, with Seattle being a very popular side, really struggle to defend Russell Wilson, defend that offense. And I think it's not going out on a limb to say most bettors have the Rams rated higher than the Seahawks coming into the season. And certainly after week 1, they're not really budging on that opinion. And so if we're looking at the numbers, Seattle closed 3, Rams are 3.5. I think a lot of bettors are going to look at that and say, I'm basically getting the same price, and somewhat disregard of how important the number of 3 is. But they're going to look at basically getting the same number in a game that Seattle led by a couple of touchdowns, with the Rams coming off Sunday night, and say that was a great offense matched up against this Colts defense. You think the Rams are going to find the top 5?
Yeah, that was going to be my next suggestion. And I think it pretty much has to be there, by process of eliminating, like as you indicated, you've got a high octane offense on prime time. The undercurrent was supposedly they didn't even hit their full playbook because they were so far ahead. They've got a lot of options left that have yet to be seen this year with Stafford. So, and as bad as Indianapolis looked last week, that's going to be ringing in people's heads too. So I agree 100%. The Rams have to be in there too.
Talk to me about Minnesota and Arizona. We saw the Vikings fall way behind to Cincinnati in that game on the road last week. Now it's another road game for them, going across the country to the desert to play Arizona, who everybody, like we said at the start of the show, saw really dominate a Titans team that a lot of people were very high on. We've been hearing nothing but how great this Cardinals offense is the entire week. You get the losing team going on the road to face the winning team, a very big jump in terms of point spread, and how the Cardinals go from a 3-point dog to a 4-point favorite. What do you think here of this game? And do you think we can see the Cardinals inside the top 5?
The Cardinals? I think we will not see the Cardinals. I would lean the Vikings in this game.
Interesting.
Were you taking me for a ride with that?
I was setting it up so you could go either way. That's how we work here on the show, sort of on the fly.
You know what? I think that there's a hell of a lot of Minnesota Viking believers that are going to give them a pass and realize that this line's over the key 3 number. So I think Minnesota is going to get a hell of a lot of support, and people aren't going to be in a hurry to lay 3.5. So whether this hits the top 5, I don't know, but I think it's going to get more picks in Arizona for sure.
I'm not going to put this I'm not going to make a vote here for the top 5 on Minnesota. As somebody who bet Minnesota personally early in the week, I agree with what you're saying with where the number ultimately got to. If this was at 4.5, which is where it was earlier in the week, and this number didn't move, then I think I'm with you saying Minnesota is going to be a top 5, because that early support for Arizona was at 2.5 and 3. The rest was sort of people chasing on to that steam that came out very early when this market was open. But if this was 4.5, I'd be with you. But at 3.5, I think we see a game that's not quite 50-50, but not enough to get into the top 5. So we've got our 2
for top 5.
Yeah, we've got our 2 so far. We got to find 3 more. Give me another game that you're looking at that might crack that top 5.
I think, believe it or not, I think the Bears are going to be very inviting to people.
Okay, we're now below 3.
Yeah, because if that was 3, then I think it would have been more leveled on each side. But I think that 2.5, when people are going up and down this list and say, well, do I want to be involved in double digits? Do I want to, be laying 3.5? I get underneath this 3. It's the home team. Chicago really isn't that bad, are they? And come on, it's Cincinnati. So I think by default, a lot of people end up on the Bears. And a lot of the Cincinnati supporters at +3 may not be supporters in an important contest at only +2.5.
Is there any concern with this continuing to move lower? I'm looking at places, Pinnacle, BetOnline, some of the major offshores, all at -2 right now. We're seeing 2.5. Could it be a spot where people may look at this and say, market's at 2, I don't want 2.5? Or is this a game that you think will get the support from the Bears between now and kickoff, that by the time most of the picks are going in, this is going to be matching what the market shows?
I think this could go either way. I don't think anybody's really ever going to come in on the Bears, so to speak. I'm not hearing any sort of undercurrent of support for the Bears. I think I would guess this game's going to get left alone, basically. The people that got a great line on Cincinnati are happy with it. And maybe you'll get some buyback on people that overbought and are trying to side or middle the game. But so with that in mind, I don't think this is going to trickle down further. I just think the home field's going to be too inviting, and Cincinnati is just too unproven. And they tried to give away that game at the end with Minnesota.
Tried very hard, and we're fortunate to get a little bit of referee assist in their favor. So let's do this. Let's put the Bears on sort of the fringe here. We're locked in with our 2 with the Rams and the Patriots. Let me just throw a couple at you very quickly and see what your sort of gauge on them is that I think could potentially stand out. So I would say the Bills, although they're laying points on the road. We've got a lot of teams laying points on the road. These short road favorites, always popular. I'll say the Bills, the Cowboys, and the Chiefs. Those are all right at 3 or 3.5. Do any of those jump out to you as potential top 5s?
Yeah, I think Dallas might get some support. I think that 3.5 is going to look pretty inviting to people. That Buffalo, I just don't know how to read the people, what the average person is going to think with that Buffalo Miami. I mean, Buffalo, Buffalo can look pretty easy. They're going to say there's no way they're going 0-2. I mean, and they should easily be able to wipe this team. Miami barely got by New England, and Tua, I think we had the second or third worst quarterback performance last week, didn't he?
It was near the bottom for sure. Yeah. So when we're thinking about potentially putting the Bears in the top 5, but we're looking at Buffalo laying 3.5 on the road, or we're looking at Dallas getting 3.5 points. Do either of those potentially outrule Chicago for you in confidence? So you're
No,
sticking with Chicago.
no, I think Dallas. Out of those two, I would say Dallas.
I think Cowboys getting the points is going to be very appealing for a lot of folks. Despite the injuries, Collins suspended, lose Lawrence, but a lot of people are going to put the emphasis on what they saw with this team nearly beating the Buccaneers on the road on Thursday Night Football game. Again, everybody watched it, and we're all sort of reminded what Prescott and this offense looked like before the injury last season. I think people are buying into that, especially when they're seeing this many points given to him against the Chargers team that just snuck one out against Washington. According to the scoreboard, you look deeper, it's different.
Well, and people are forgetting, they're off 10 days rest. They've had a lot of time to prepare. And in a lot of people's eyes, the Cowboys won that game. They should have won that game, frankly. So, and a lot of people don't pay attention to interior lineman injuries. So the Stars are playing. Okay, they're good to go.
All right, so Cowboys top 5 to go along with the Patriots and to go along with the Rams. You're adamant on the Bears, so I'm
not adamant. I'm adamant that I'm not
it's a strong case. So let's put the Bears in the top 5 at 2.5. So that gives us 4. Where are we going for the 5th?
I don't know. What's your suggestion?
Well, okay. I think the Broncos are laying too big of a number for people to get interested in. If that was anything less than 6, I think the Broncos are for sure going to be in there. The Chiefs number moved. So that would have been the number one that I would have looked at with people remembering what they saw from Baltimore. And there's just so much distaste for Lamar Jackson and his passing abilities that it seems like with the injuries piling up, there's the way that game moved late. That got to 3 at close, which to me was incredible that number moved that much on game day. So there's no shortage of support for people betting against the Baltimore Ravens and with the Chiefs. I think people are going to run to it. But at 3.5, that gets a little bit tough. The other one that would stand out to me, if we're not going to put the Bills in there at 3.5, the other one that would stand out to me, I think, would have to be the Saints, another road favorite, 3.5 at the Panthers, 38-3 against the Packers. I did a power ratings article for Covers, and I posted it up there. And there was endless comments about how the Saints are not a top 10 team in my ratings. Why are they not above it? They just beat the Green Bay Packers. You're out of your mind. There was a lot of different adjectives that were thrown before my name from people who were upset that they weren't in there. I think that performance against the Packers just surprised so many folks that we might see that bleed over. And then it looks the same way. You're opposing Sam Darnold and the Panthers. I know it's within the division, but I think people are just going to look at Darnold against the Saints defense and just auto bet New Orleans.
So just so I understand you, did you not have the Saints in the top 10?
I have them right outside. Because how did anyone know what the quarterback situation was going to be? We could be optimistic about Jameis, but I don't know if they're a top 10 team yet. I have them like 11th or 12th. They're just on the outside.
Okay, well, this isn't the forum to discuss who's above them, but
I've got a strong argument for that.
As solid as the Saints were last year, I think they belonged in the top 10 until proven otherwise. But I think I would probably lean the Saints. We're going to just assume that there's no further COVID issues. That's the only thing that we can do. We can't play guesswork on it. And if there is no other issues out by tomorrow, evening, I think people are going to start to feel really comfortable with the Saints, and that line's going to look attractive. I think this line's only at 3.5 on the if come of worse COVID news anyway. So if, the closer this gets to game time, I think the line goes up. Even though there is a fair amount of sharp people that do like Carolina, but I don't see them loving it. You know what I mean?
So are you willing to put the Saints top 5 here to round things out, or are any of the double-digit favorites at home potentially going to bump them out, or is like continued support? The Raiders got in the top 5 last week by a huge margin. Is that support going to continue off of the win, getting 6 at Pittsburgh? Are any of those better than the Saints here to round up this top 5?
I think Pittsburgh's going to get enough support just to keep it out. I mean, people realize the soft spot after Monday Night Football short rest situation. So Pittsburgh's going to get some support. So I see the teeter-totter kind of, like the scales of justice is supposed to be, sort of half and half.
Interesting conversation I had yesterday to sort of wrap this up, and just on that Steelers note, everyone knows about the situation, like you mentioned. Monday Night Football game, short week, traveling across country, early start. Gruden doesn't like to fly. All of that. When you're looking at it from a betting perspective, going outside of the contest here, but just from a betting perspective, how much of that do you consider priced into the number before you even start looking at it?
You know what? Sometimes you have to check yourself and realize it already is in the number. I mean, most of the time, this is all baked in, and you have to consider that. So if you know that something is already baked into the number and it still looks good, you have to do your extra due diligence on, well, why, does it still look good? Or, is there extra value here because I know it's baked into the number? So that's the way that I look at it.
Yeah, and we see that, right? They go from 6-point dogs at Buffalo to 6-point home favorites against the Raiders. You take out a point or two for home field, you're looking at like a 10-point swing week to week. Is the gap between Buffalo and the Raiders really that big? And that makes you wonder how much of this is already priced in and that number inflated, maybe just a touch.
Yeah, I think, and it's too, the Raiders have enough firepower, supposedly.
That's the bets coming in right now. You're bad mouthing the Raiders, and people are calling to tell you to do otherwise to influence those people watching the show.
Yeah. So,
all right. So, let's wrap up the top 5 here. We've got the Rams in for sure. We feel great about that one. We feel really good about the Patriots being inside the top 5. We're going to put the Saints in as that 5th sort of fringe one with the sport thinking that line might go up.
Yeah, I think so. What do you think?
I think so too. And then we've got the Cowboys getting the points on the road at the Chargers as number 4. And then the only one here that is interesting that I'm not sure about, but I'm leaning to you here, the Bears at 2.5. I'll go with you. I'll trust the contest expert here, and we'll put that in to round out the top 5.
I firmly believe that I have no idea. That
is exactly what the viewers want to hear. 2 more orders of business before we wrap things up. Most selected this week. You won last week with Minnesota. I picked Tennessee. You edged me out by about 80 picks, so you are 1-0. I got to go first last week, which means you get to go first this week. Who do you think is going to be most selected in the Circa Millions?
You know what? I have no choice but to take New England. I know you probably like them too, but that seems to stick out.
You get the first pick, so you get that one. So then I got to go with the Rams laying the points at Indy as my top pick. Hopefully be able to square that one out.
It sounds good. I'm getting hungry.
The steak dinner, end of the season. 1-0 for you. We'll see how it plays out week by week. Last order of business before we get going is, of course, the Survivor. Surprisingly, a lot of folks eliminated last week, but that contest is always a lot of fun. We're picking the most selected Survivor pick this week. Last week, we went with San Francisco. We were spot on with that one. Now, this week in week 2, a lot of double-digit favorites at home. So a lot of people are going to be plotting their way around that. You always say the big favorites are a gift to anyone playing the contest because you know where not to go. You want to avoid those and hope for the upset, so that eliminates people. Another one of your taglines, play to win. That very much leads you to potentially winning the contest. But I'm guessing the most selected for the Circa Survivor is going to be one of these big double-digit favorites. Which one's it going to be?
Well, I don't think it's going to be Green Bay for sure. They're on the road.
Packers at home, laying 11.
Oh, that's a home game?
There you go. 11. It changes everything. You're saying you're on the hill. You said you don't have enough time. You haven't even made it to Monday Night Football yet.
Oh my gosh! Well, I'm glad I'm glad I bet him already. I don't know what it was. I felt like the game was in Detroit, so I really didn't do a deep dive into it. But there's a lot of value in that one. Jesus.
Yes, Packers at 11 is a great bet.
God. That's funny. Cleveland's going to really stick out, but people are going to want to. You know what you have to take into consideration, and I don't have my list handy of what the Christmas and Thanksgiving games are. So Cleveland is one of those teams, right?
Well, but how many people are really looking forward to that at this? I know you and all of the sharper contestants are, but in general, people aren't thinking that far ahead, are they?
If you are not thinking about what the Thanksgiving and Christmas games are, just keep banging your head against the wall, because that's about as much success as you're going to have. You absolutely have to be considering those teams. You just completely omit them for a little while, as long as you can.
The Browns play at the Packers on Christmas, along with the Colts at the Cardinals. And then Thanksgiving Thursdays, Bears, Lions, Raiders, Cowboys, Bills, Saints. So of these double-digit teams, the Browns are the one that are involved in those two spots that you put so much importance on in the schedule. So you think by that, they're not going to be selected this week as high as they normally should be?
Yeah, I don't think they will. And then Tampa Bay, I didn't notice how many people selected Tampa Bay, but a lot of people used Tampa Bay last week already. So they're not even a choice available.
So you think it's going straight then to the other logical choice, which would be the Packers for most people? You love them now that they're at home, right?
I like them. I thought they were on the road, and I had already bet them. So I was like, that's what the comedy is. But yeah, the great. Just to confirm, because you were able to, Green Bay is not playing any of those 2 weeks, right?
Not on those. Well, they're hosting the Browns on Christmas Day. But that's not going to be a survivor game either way. I don't like that's going to at most. What's that going to be, a pick 'em either way? Unless, I mean, injuries, barring injuries, obviously, but that's going to be that's not going to be a huge survivor game. I think most other people are going to be going to the other one, which features the Colts at the Cardinals. At the rate we're going, we could see the Cardinals be a very popular side on Christmas.
Yeah, I think people. Boy, that's tough. That's tough. What's your guess on that? Because there's just so many variables on this.
I think it's going to be the Packers as most selected. It could be the Browns. I think people might look at that, but Houston off of the win, Detroit off of the loss. Houston looked a heck of a lot better than Detroit did, albeit the strength of opponent very, very different. But I think people are it's going to be continuously fading a couple of those teams. Potentially the second one I could see would be the Broncos on the road at Jacksonville. Denver looked very, very good. Jags are a mess, but I don't think people are going to go to a road team with these home favorites as big as they are. I think it's got to be one of these three. And like you mentioned, a lot of folks were on Tampa Bay last week to open the season. I think now we're going to see people go to the Monday Nighter and take Green Bay.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to agree with you on that. I think by default, people are not looking forward to Green Bay against Cleveland anyway. So I think that's going to be the smart bomb this week.
All righty. So we're in. We've got the top 5 consensus picks projected. We've got our most selected in, and we've got the Packers as the most selected survivor. Take a couple questions before we let you get back to the odds screen and calling around to all the books and getting the bets in for week 2.
You know what? We didn't go over what the most selected survivor pick was last week and what we guessed, did we?
We're putting producer Brady on the spot to dig up that information as we take a question on the Buffalo Bills. How much do you downgrade the Bills, or do you wait to downgrade? And that would be coming off of the loss last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I am very confident in saying that their rating did not move at all in my books based on that game against a very difficult defense. That was a game that very competitive. There was nothing that I saw there that warranted downgrading them whatsoever. Same thing for you?
Yeah, the only mention that I made of it was that I felt pretty confident that they were going to go over their season win total. So the only downgrade that I made overall was that now I was going to be a little skeptical that they were going to go over their win total. I think that was probably going to be unlikely. If that makes any sense to you, and how I processed it.
Absolutely.
I don't think they're worse than I expected. But there's a cause for concern, and I'm still waiting for Josh Allen to play in front of a crowd and have a great game.
It hasn't happened yet. We'll put it that way. Timothy Hunter comes in. I feel like Cincy is a square road dog this week. Well, I think we already touched on that and saying that you think the Bears now at less than 3 makes it awfully interesting. Del Toledo comes in. The Jets will be one of my picks. Good luck. We'll put it that way.
I don't think, that they've got problems, but you can't fault anybody for taking it.
No, it looked like nobody was fully ready. Like the youth of Wilson, the inexperience of head coach of Salah. It's close. I'll say that as a big Jets fan. I think they're really, really close, and it looks a lot better than weeks and seasons past. But I think they're right on the edge of getting sort of a breakthrough where they can win. But I think that's probably a mid-season turn we're going to see from them.
Yeah, there's still a lot of skeptics on Denver, I'm sure. So
that's no questions there. That'll do it for us on another Thursday, week 2. Hopefully the results of our consensus projections going to be a lot better than week 1. I feel a lot better than these numbers than I do last week. I'll say that for sure. So if we're not seeing a 3 or 2 or 4-1 here in our projections, I'll be pretty disappointed.
I'll be very surprised. And what I really liked about today is I went in not knowing anything except New England. So I like the way we talk through it because it's informative, gives you a couple different things to look at and consider. And it's just on the fly, which is fresh.
That's how we do it. And that was fully evidenced by that Green Bay home road mix-up in which, well, we'll leave viewers seeing the authenticity of the show. But for LVC and myself,
don't pretend stuff like that doesn't happen to you too sometimes.
It definitely happens, especially when I'm on air on the fly. It definitely happens to the best of us. For LVC and myself and Covers.com, that'll do it. Good luck with all your bets this week, and we'll see you back here next Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific.